Well, this is going to get tons of traffic too, because I'm just going to put a big 10-minute pause that just says footage not found.
Ooh, yeah. X-rated.
You want me to tell you about it? I'll tell you about technical difficulties with like a duck trying to fix a broken pipe.
Well, I guess in some ways it brings up a point for me, because there are certain people like yourself, Tom, you know, who was with Band Grande, James, Carol. I mean, people who are, you know, entering the environment of clubs and the music scene and trying to, like, create more, you know, substance through their efforts. But sometimes it feels like that the scene, much like the bands competing with each other, it ends up being the people who are trying to help the bands starting to bump into each other.
Every once in a while, people are like, "Oh, well, yeah." So I was talking to Bubba Buck. Well, I know that you guys have. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess when I see like, what's a good example? Somebody did something, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I wish we would have thought of that." Like, I think there's a healthy aspect of like, "Oh, that was awesome," you know, like, "Man, what a great idea." But like, I'm not trying to play ball in like East Coast, West Coast rivalries. Like, it's ridiculous. We're all hanging out with the same bands. We're all, you know,
Friends.
Yeah. So like that,
People.
I don't know. And I've heard like, well, there's a divided line between you, and you. I'm just like, no, there's not. Like, I talk to all these people. I book these people's bands. Like, I don't know. It's weird. I think people like the idea of tension and like the idea of like drama. But like, I don't like the idea of drama. I think it sucks.
Well, it's kind of been a Cleveland thing for such a long time, and I think that it's part of the reason why, you know, a lot of people who want to get to the next level still feel like they have to leave town. You know, I mean, like the Moxies are threatening to go to Nashville and kind of have one foot down there. And there's a whole bunch of people who seem to be saying the same thing. You know. I mean,
well, I think
Dusky's moving to LA.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's.
I wonder. I don't know that the moves like that are necessarily the right moves.
I totally.
I don't think going to a place like, I don't say like moving to New York for example, unless you have a very specific thing, unless you have a very good connection. I think going somewhere where there are thousands of more that are probably a lot more talented and have been doing it a lot more, to try to like be that needle in the haystack is a bad idea.
I have been saying that for years. I've been saying that for years. Thank you for saying that, because I've been saying that for years.
And I think the landscape of the way the music industry works with blogs and the internet, like, you don't necessarily need to do that. If you're good, you're good. If you draw, you're going to draw. It may take some time. I think a lot of Cleveland bands don't get out of town to play other shows, which is probably the biggest problem. Yeah.
I feel like it's better to be a big fish in a small pond than like a small fish in a big ass infinite pond of people that are way better.
And Cleveland is a perfect hub for that.
You want to see more music?
Yeah.
Well, no,
people. Yeah. No, I'm saying, but I'm just saying, like, the whole idea of like leaving Cleveland and moving to New York.
Everybody's individual. Everybody has their own path, man.
Okay, let's put it this way. That's not the only way.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
In Cleveland, you can get to Chicago, Detroit, Columbus, New York, like in a fairly short amount of time. You can do those on the weekends. Like, so it's almost like a good hub to live, 75% cheaper than any of those other places, and you kind of create paths. But I don't see. We're booking Rendezvous this year, and we're kind of expanding it, and we're doing. One of the things we're doing is we're doing a show at the House of Blues, and the more and more I dig through and like search for bands and like think about who we've booked, it's kind of scary to me that there aren't more like bigger bands, more popular bands in Cleveland. like you can count on one hand who can draw
400 people.
maybe with the help of like the perfect lineup, you know. It's really weird. And I was thinking, well, is it just because I'm just so used to looking at these all the time, like, or is there this whole other circle that, like, you know, because I always talk about how, like, there are all these silos and bands. Like, am I in, like, a bigger silo of all those silos? Is there a whole other world that, like, I don't realize is going on in Cleveland with bands that are, like, you know, pooling those kind of numbers? But, yeah, I don't...
Well, they're cover bands.
Yeah.
They are cover bands.
Yeah.
And they play House of Blues regularly. Wish You Were Here.
All that stuff, those tribute bands, yeah. But, like, I think it's nuts that there's not, like, the standouts. Like, I mean, you know, obviously you have, like, a band like Mr. Gnome, who basically is a touring band, and they do a show at the Beachland every year, and this year they're doing one in May, and, like, they're going to fill that room. But it's almost because they're, like, you know, they play once a year, and then they go out on tour. So, like, they get their satisfaction as being in a band by going out and playing all over the place. So they only have to play Cleveland every once in a while. You know, but bands play, like, every month. And even that is pretty close together. You know, like, I think a lot of people will be like, well, you know, I'm going to book this other show. I'm sure you deal with this as well. When we're booking a show, we're like, all right, we're doing this big thing. This is the bill. And then, like, the band books a show, like, 3 days before the show. And you're like, I felt like I didn't need to say this. Like, why did you do that? You know, so... I don't know. I think
that happens all the time.
I think it's weird that Cleveland bands don't get out of town more, and I think it's weird that we don't have a larger population.
And a lot of times the excuse is, I gotta work, but it's cheaper to live here than everywhere else, so people aren't using the advantages we have here to their advantage.
Right.
You know?
Well, we've got, Max Sellers, who moved to North Collingwood, moved back to Cleveland from Brooklyn, is trying to tell all of his friends in Brooklyn that they should move to Cleveland because you can tour from here. Your exact point.
You build a studio in your house.
Right. For $800.
Yeah, it's crazy how cheap. I mean, I don't know. So I think, and I know that this is part of the plan for you guys, but to help kind of create, you know, a network like of, even travel patterns that bands can just go on. We've been trying to make connections. We've been talking to the owner of Subterranean in Chicago, and we're going to start sending Chicago bands and Cleveland bands. Like, that's cool. Like, that's exciting.
That's great.
So, you know, but then it's like, how do you find the Beachlands and the grog shops of other cities? Because sprinkled within them are the 30 other places that call themselves music venues in Cleveland. Well, there are 75 of those in Chicago, you know? So it's like rooting out, you know, so if there was just, remember they used to sell those books at Borders, like the guide to the music industry, and it'd be like $35, and you'd be like, look at all these clubs. But even those had like all the shitty clubs in them too, you know? So, you know, some sort of resource for Cleveland bands of these are the people. And I guess Indie on the Move is a good one for stuff like that. But even a more centralized kind of Cleveland hub type thing might be helpful to bands. And just like, I don't know, I'm wondering, why aren't bands touring or playing outside of shows? But then that comes back to the question of how many of these bands want to even do that. And is there a problem? Is there a problem with the music community because they're not, or because they don't want to, or like what? It's the chicken or the egg kind of thing to me.
I feel like it's a cultural thing just in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Whereas like music itself or art really isn't valued as a commodity. It's you know, like, okay, you play music, now it's your real job kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I have a huge theory about this that I'm working on, and it's that I think it has to do, and this is a great thing, but I think it's a trickle-down effect from the art museum being free. We have one of the best art museums in the country, and it's one of the only ones that's free. And I think that somehow Cleveland has it in their blood that they're entitled to their art, and that, you know, paying to see a band is the craziest thing ever. When that person's going to spend $40 at the bar that they're seeing the band and that they didn't want to pay $5 to see. And so I think there's this weird, like, well, you know, why would I pay, you know, because the problem is we've got these, like, festivals like Bright Winter. It's free. Ingenuity's free. Like, all these things that are booking all these bands.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I see it all the time in the Happy Dog when they have that cutoff point where it's like, it's time to pay the $5 cover to get in, and people are showing up just to eat hot dogs. And every once in a while, I'll look at the door and see, someone just makes that face like, oh man, really? I gotta pay $5 to get in here now?
Right.
I just want to get a hot dog. And they're like, but now bands are playing, and then you'll see them walk away all frustrated.
That's one of the few places where the people will just come in anyway.
Well,
That's one of the few places.
Well,
And
it's only $5.
and then as a musician, you're like, when you're playing or as a promoter, when you're at like these places playing a show, you're like, where's the door guy at? Why isn't the door guy there? Are we ready? Why do you walk away? Come back. There are people coming in. Like, I think that there's a weird it's not about money mentality, but like, I think it should be more so. If a band wants to make this as their job, they need to start creating a budget for themselves. It needs to get it out of the head that this is a hobby. There needs to be, like, you have to want to make money from doing it. And I get that it's cool to be like, well, we just like to play shows, we just like to play music. But like, if it's your hobby, fine. But if you want to be a working musician, like, you gotta get paid for your work. It's crazy how many times at the end of a show, maybe a show that hasn't gone awesome. I remember we did a show at the Grog Shop 2 years ago, and it was like, we had a run of just solid, like, good full room shows, and like, we hit this show at the Grog Shop and it wasn't awesome. And I was just like, man, it's like I gave this band like $50. I was like, this is, and he's like, oh, I didn't even think we were getting paid for this. You know how many times I've heard, I didn't think we were getting paid for this. Never, that should never be said. You should always assume you're getting paid for this. Like, it's crazy to me.
Well, also like, I think that like there's a panic with attendance too for like either the venue or for the bands themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, well, if we have charged $5, maybe 10 people will show up. If we make it free, maybe 20 people will show up because there's another show down the street that's $5. But if I go to this show, it's free and I don't have to pay anything. So,
I think there's a weird narrow thing where free hurts. I think there's a psychological. If I have to pay $3 even $5, this is worth it for me as opposed to a free show.
Well, plus from a club budget perspective, I mean, we would prefer to have the door go to the bands, and for us to be able to pay the electric bill and the taxes and the employees and the kitchen and the food and buy beer all from the bar. So all of that other stuff has to come out of the bar. But once we start cutting those deals, which we're doing way too much right now, I think in the Beachline, that you get 15% of the bar. But if you only bring 40 people and we only ring up $300,
right?
We're barely surviving on $300 a night.
You're getting $30.
And we're giving $45, which is nothing to somebody.
Yeah, especially like 4 bands.
Well, it's usually a lot less than that for those door deals, and sometimes it's. But it's hard, and I feel bad because I mean we can't. We would be out of business if we paid everybody that didn't bring anybody to the door.
Right. And I think there has to be a responsibility to the band to bring people. I mean, we don't need to go far as like, selling tickets, but
Well, just tell your friends that you're playing.
Right. Yeah, promote. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I heard this story a long time ago, so I don't even know how accurate it was. It was one of those like dad passed down stories to me. But there was I'll get it to relate in just a second, but there was a windshield wiper company that said they made the best windshield. Well, this guy figured out how to make these great windshield wipers, and he was also like, and the reality is, I figured out how to make them really cheap, so I don't need to mark them up that high to make a profit. So he was selling them lower than regular windshield wipers. This is a great product that I figured out a new way to make it cheaper. He went out of business. This other guy came by, this other businessman said, what's going on? He's like, I can't sell the wipers. So this new businessman bought the old patent or whatever from the guy so he could save face. And then he went and took that exact same model and he sold it for he sold it for twice as much as other windshield wipers and just marketed it and said, this is the best. And people bought it like crazy. And I'm wondering, do you think I know windshield wipers are a little more necessary than bands, I suppose, but at the end of the day, is it a devaluing that artists are doing to themselves? Is it a disservice?
I think so, and I don't think it's shady to make a show $10 because I believe that the bands that are playing on stage are worth $10. Like it costs $10 to go to the movies. It costs. You're gonna spend $30 at the bar. It costs
$10 to park.
Yeah, it costs you $5 for your coffee. It costs
$9.25 for a hot dog at the stadium.
right, like all these things. Like, and actually, my time hop today was from last year on Facebook. I asked everybody to tell me how much they spent at the bar on a given weekend, and I was going to try to do all this research and like do this thing about like, you know, ticket sales. But then I realized it'd be too intrusive on venues and like their business practices and stuff. I didn't want to like turn it into like a scathing thing. So like, but like, yeah, I think that there's a perceived value that's okay to a certain point. Like I've talked to, you know, bookers or owners, and we'll be like, well, we're going to do the show for $10. Like, really, it's just a local bill. I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine. Watch, and then it is fine, because I know that like if I'm somewhere, like, I mean, maybe it's some idiot with money, but like it's $5 or $10. I'm not going to be like, whoa, this is $10. Guys, I'm leaving. Even though the band I like is in there, all my friends are in there. I'll see you later. I'm not going to pay that $10. You're going to cough up $5. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But do you think it I mean, like you were saying, maybe the issue is if a band is trumpeting themselves and they don't have anyone else, like a promoter behind them or anyone saying like, no, actually listen, then how does a band create value?
Welsh Arms is a good example of the guys that do it themselves and create a perceived value, and it's a real value because they work hard and they come up with something new that they're going to do at every big show, and have charged. I think we did it. They've done shows. They've probably done shows at the Beachland for $15, and that's with a 3 solid band bill, like direct support and an opener, and like that seems to people that are in there doing it all the time, that seems crazy, but they found a way to find fans, not just community, but like music community members.
But do you think that was because they put value on the music from the beginning?
I mean, they're in another league of doing things right. It seems. Sam has been around for a long time. Yeah.
Has experience professionally.
Yeah.
Working with signed people.
Yeah.
And they're a very good band.
Right. And I mean, but I think it's probably all that probably comes from the same mindset. Mm-hmm. You know, the professionalism on stage, like they're like all that stuff, all those pieces, you know, kind of come from one. And what's really important with those guys is they're probably maybe the biggest band in Cleveland. No egos, 0 egos. There's nothing worse than dealing with people that are really frustrating because they think that like, you know, that like they're the biggest thing in the world and they expect things. And that's like it comes back to like Cellar Door and our brand. Like I almost think that like maybe we're not puffing up our chests enough, and like maybe if we did that a little bit, we'd even have a larger presence. But I feel like being like just a decent, good person, just like trying to help people, like that works. Like the bands that we work with are nice. We like to work with them. They're nice people. Like there have been conversations where with other bands, and we knew immediately like, nope, that's not a relationship. That's not what I want to deal with on a daily basis. You know, so I think I think that helps add to a healthy scene is like dropping like egos or some like, because like we said, if we had 25 bands that could fill the ballroom on any given night, then like all right, there's room for egos maybe, but like everybody's kind of sharing the same vibes. But yeah, and that's the other thing that's tricky with Cellar Door is like this idea. I always throw in air quotes all the time, but like I feel like in the past, and maybe I'm just not aware of, there are a lot of like promoters that like claim to be like, well, I'm the band's manager, and so I don't even like to use that word. That's why I kind of just say, well, we just kind of handle all their, we kind of help them out with their stuff, because there's always like this like fake bravado of like, you know, well, we're the manager and like here's our publicist and here's our yada yada yada, and like really it's just a bunch of your friends, and there's this. and I'm sure you guys deal with
If
this.
you talk to Ryan Hodson about that phenomenon,
Oh, yeah.
he will tell you how much he thinks they.
And when I'm
she can never
contacting-
get anything done.
When I'm contacting people I don't know, I'm just saying, hey, you know, I help this band out. I don't say like, I don't have like manager, Cellar Door Productions, LLC, website, phone number. You know, like I leave all that stuff out because it's bullshit to everybody. You know, and I feel like we've been able to do things where like, okay, we've proved to ourselves that I don't have to say promoter without like feeling really embarrassed about that word because they're, you know, because it comes with such a, you know,
Right.
Well,
weird thing.
but you
Well-
promote too, so there you go.
Well, that's the other thing.
But a lot of those people who kind of, end up being friends that manage bands,
Mhm.
it ends up being mostly about, well, I'm managing the band, so you have to give me more money for them
Right.
to play, and there's no, like what you do is you put a show together and you follow it all the way through.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people out there who are just like, my only job is to negotiate a price for my band.
Ah, that's weird. But yeah, so I think like that's why why I'm afraid to say like, well, you know, we'll hire this guy's manager. Like, come on. Like, I guess technically, you know, we have a business deal, we have contracts, but like, they're such taboo phrases in a music industry in Cleveland that isn't through the roof thriving, where it's kind of ridiculous to say stuff like that. But yeah, I've hit up bands like egos that like Booking Bright. They're like, well, we want $2,500, like a local band. We want $2,500. I'm like, well, you know, these other bands that you've opened for are doing it for far less because, well, we'll only do it if we get paid exactly what you paid them and if you show us how much you paid them. I'm like, all right, well, maybe we'll talk to you next year. So I think a lot has to be said for, you know, just being nice. Just being nice.
Yeah, and being willing to, do your homework and kind of people.
Yeah, and I mean, not being absolutely cutthroat about everything too. That sometimes shows don't go well. You know, sometimes, you know.
Yeah, there's other reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're in a good position where, you know, there's not a big budget for something like the Heights Music Hop, or there's not a big budget for something like Bright when you add 60 bands to that number. But I can say like, okay, well, if you do this show, like I promise you, we'll get you a show, you know, that's going to have a bigger budget, or it's going to be like down the road. So we're kind of able to finagle stuff like
Now,
that.
did you guys talk about the music hop already in this group?
No.
Our students might not know about that, but I thought it was really cool how you guys partnered with the Lee Road Development,
Yeah.
Cedar Lee Development Corporation. Were able to get a pass-through grant from Kaga Arts and Culture in
Yeah.
order to help support the show.
Yeah, it's that Future Heights is the organization, and it was actually their thing, and they reached out to us to kind of partner with them on it. And that's another thing where it doesn't really say Cellar Door anymore, other than we get it added to the program because we don't want. They're trying to create a brand for the festival, you know, and that's another thing that's kind of free up and down Lee Road and all the businesses, and I think it's on its third year this year. But originally they paired it with Beer Week, so it was almost kind of a built-in crowd.
Bottle house, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then they broke off from Beer Week for the first time this year, so we'll see how it goes. But last year, I mean, the reliance on the door of all these venues. But again, like, there's government money to pay those bands, and those are free shows for the participant. So to me, that's like,
More free art.
yeah.
Well, right, and it hurts the clubs. I mean,
It does, big
it
time.
really hurts. the
I
clubs.
can't book a show around.
Last year, our business in July and August was a third. I used up all of my line of credit because, it was horrible.
Because you're competing with free
Free
shows
shows.
all over the
We're-
city.
and
Yeah.
the
even
same acts that are
Right, that's the
looking to
big
play
one.
your club are you know.
Well, and there's festival radius clauses now, so even bands that are playing Nelsonville or,
That's crazy. Yeah.
Festival radius.
Foursquare, if you sign national touring bands are like happen to sign contracts to say that they won't play within 500 miles
Which is crazy.
of this show. Like they want people, if you do Lollapalooza, you can't play within 4 states.
Well, when we were,
Yeah.
when I came on to Bright this year, we usually did Rendezvous in March. I'm like, there's no way. I was like, we're just going to postpone it. Because one, time and work involved, but two, because, having those two things back to back, I think it's very weird.
Like, and there's more and more big money festivals. I've been watching this new little bit that Live Nation has bought Bonnaroo. And it's just, it's like there's all these festivals, so Live Nation has to buy them all to control the music industry.
One thing that I find an interesting question, like somebody came at me on Twitter about Bright Winter. It was like, just a corporate music festival, like funded by corporations. And I was like, yeah, so what? Like, why not, like if that's going to pay bands, and like why not take Key Bank's money and give it to artists and give it their worth, I mean, obviously we don't want to start putting like
The
logos
CEO
on
key things, cover blues,
Right.
horrible blues.
Yeah,
cover.
as long as as long as you set the parameters and say complete creative control, like as long as you're not putting like progressive logos on bass drum heads.
Yeah, right.
We wouldn't be able to put on Jazz Fest without sponsors.
Right. And like
And even Live Nation would not be able to put on their concert season without sponsors, or any of those festivals without sponsors.
and Rendezvous, we get sponsors. And at the first year we did it, people were like, "Well, that's weird. You're really only doing it like at the Beachland across 2 nights." And I'm like, "Well, we want to make it bigger, and if we get those people on board now, and a check for $500 helps.
Yeah.
It helps. It helps to make sure that even if this thing tanks, we're gonna be able to get these bands some money because we promised them that like this is gonna be worth it for them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it's gonna have to come to a point where, there's gotta be some kind of club networking so we can get more sponsorship dollars. I
Yeah.
can't survive without figuring out how to get more sponsorship
Yeah.
dollars in the Beachland. It's not gonna work.
Just like, it was like, isn't there some guy that's just gonna die like
Yeah,
that
right.
would like it's just gonna drop like $3 million on the Beachland, like
Yeah, right.
right? Like just waiting for that to happen. Like somebody out there's gotta
Happens to churches all the time. It's got to start happening.
right. It
Venues.
totally does. Yeah. Like $8 million fund endowment.
So if you run into anybody, send them my way.
The guy that started the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival created an endowment so it'll live beyond him. And that festival has no corporate sponsorship, no advertisement, it's totally free.
He was rich.
It was totally,
God.
yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, but that's...
How to succeed. Be richer than God.
So, how has the orchestra survived for so long? They have a patronage system that appeals to the established rich of our region.
Right.
There are young rich people and old rich people who love rock and roll music at this point.
Do we need to have a
It's not just
buy-in program
classical
like
and
that?
jazz and stuff like that, but where are they and where are the patrons? And if things are going to be free, artists are going to have to, a lot of them are going to have to get into a patronage system in order to keep living and making art.
Right.
To Patreon, you familiar with that? It's another music service. You put it manages a donation button on your website or whatever. People can subscribe to your music, so every time you create a new work, they're automatically buying it through this system.
They pay like what, $2 a month or something?
It's like I pledge to buy every song you put out, and I'll buy each song for $1 or whatever. And when you put out new work, they are automatically billed, and you get the money. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, we're looking at things like the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos and crowdfunding and seeing a different kind of patronage for the first time where the common man and woman can patronize the arts through, they can be like the kings of old and say, hey, create this thing that I'm a part of. I'm an instigator for art.
A lot of web series are being funded that way.
Yeah,
I have mixed feelings with Kickstarter.
a lot of people do. Even the bands doing it do.
It's just, I feel like, I don't know.
things, like that guy who did just did the Kickstarter
Yeah,
for
it's
his dog surgery and then took the money and spent it and put his dog down. It's rife with abuse.
Whoa.
I feel like if the rewards are super sweet, I think it's cool. But like I see people doing Indiegogo campaigns because they want like equipment, and I'm just like I want this piece of equipment. I'm like, it's
Take a
ridiculous. Just or save your money.
Yeah.
But like,
Well, here in town,
if you're passionate about something and this is your thing, you
it's
just
your tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, here in town, Noteworthy Credit Union is a great resource for musicians to get a loan to buy equipment or pay for things like a tour or pressing or a band. Yeah, I looked at the De La Soul Kickstarter that's about 20 days in now that is at 4 times the amount they asked for. It's got a lot of sweet stuff like custom signed sneakers.
Yeah, this is great.
And a night with the band, tickets to 10 shows, all kinds of cool stuff. But they got that way because they've already had label support. People know who they are. They're 30 years into their 20-some years
Right.
into their career, and it's the same. When we talk about music being free or giving away music, that's the new model or whatever, and talk about bands like dropping their labels like Nine Inch Nails or Radiohead.
Well, they
Those
can't.
bands already were at the
Yeah.
point where they had this gigantic established fan base. They already had the mailing list subscribers. They had
Right.
direct connections to everybody. Whatever they do is already publicity, noteworthy. People are going to talk about it, and the conversation has already started. For everybody else who has to play on the same playing field as that, where the top quality produced material is being given away for nothing. That's the rub.
Yeah.
That's like, how do you compete with the best stuff out there that is the most well known is already nothing for free.
Yeah, I feel like we need to like take back the fact that your band has value. What you do, the time you put in, the hours you spend practicing, there's value. Like,
You're camping against factory farm music.
Are you guys still
Local organic.
that's the other thing is I think that there's like this perceived value on Cellar Door. We for helpers.
What you pay?
Well, that's the thing is like that's the other thing. Like, could I quit my job and do this?
No.
Maybe I could. But like I feel like there's definitely like the whole like do what you love, quit your job thing is really for people that just have a shitload of money already or have a giant safety net, which I do not have.
like rich parents?
Yeah, exactly. Or like, are just kind of set up. I think you see a lot of this, like, just throw it all away and just go for it. Like, yeah, but it's really not. I'll stay up a couple hours at night to work on the stuff to know that I'm still getting my salary at my job. And I thought about it like a lot, like, because honestly, if I could wake up in the morning at 8, and I've had days like I just started a new job, and between that time I had like a week. I took a week, and I was just. My days were full with the Cellar Door stuff, full with meetings, and I would realize, like, if I did just quit my job, I could probably turn things up fast enough to make it worth it. Just with the website, with content, with advertisers, because we have a couple advertisers, but we really haven't gone for it, because when things started getting heavy with the booking and the label and the thing, the website kind of falls away. When things start, like this happens. So, like, but if I had, like, a 9 to 5 to do that every single day, like, all those things could stay up, and then I wouldn't feel bad about, getting advertisers for the site to, like, be able to pay everybody, something, So, I think that's weird, too. Like Dusky quit his job and was playing shows. But, again, he was the type of guy that would play bars. So, like, it's one thing to, like, I'm going to write my album, these are my songs, and I'm going to play shows every once in a while. It's another thing to play, like, all the area bars 3 times a week. For 3 hours, 25% covers just to pay the bills. Like that's the difference between a job and like being an artist as your job. So I don't know what the answer is there.
Along those lines, can you talk about the band? You have the 4 bands.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work financially? They hire you. You take a cut of what you do for them.
Yeah.
And then how did you go about selecting them? Like, do you pick people that are in your brand, or do they approach you?
We've had some people. We've had a number of people approach us. It seems like it seems like they're all rock bands, and I think it's because I was like, well, where are the rock bands? You know, there are a lot of like indie rock bands, like there's a lot of folk stuff going on. I'm like, what about just like, you know, some rock? So I think that's what kind of ended up informing our choices. But basically, like, one, they're bands that we feel like we could help. Like, if there are bands that are already killing it and taking care of business, and like we're not gonna pretend like we could do something for them that they aren't already doing for themselves. So they're bands that we feel like could use, you know, support. And basically, there's no upfront money to us or anything like that, because like I said, the idea of like, oh, we're gonna be your manager has like this weird connotation to it of like you're gonna get ripped off, because that's how it's worked in this town for a long time, for years. Talking to you, Guerrilla Productions.
Yeah.
So
Censored.
So like there's that. So basically, you know, we agree to book all their shows, and why that's advantageous to them is, one, they aren't good at booking their own shows, and two, the time and energy and years that I put in makes it easier for me to like Facebook chat Ryan and say, hey, can you put this band, you know, we're looking for a higher profile show for this band, because, you know, he'll be like, hey, we're looking for bands, do you have any ideas? So like there's a lot of like kind of favors out there just from my years of doing it for so long. So that makes it worth it for the bands that we book, in Cleveland anyway, because like Midnight Passenger, Jim Stewart said, I'm recording this band, they're like really good, and I don't know why many people haven't heard of them. And then we booked them on Rendezvous last year, and they like destroyed. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, Midnight Passengers.
And the record's coming out on Saturday, and like honestly, like it's like I feel like it's like a completely realized, like ready to go on like record store shelves record. Like, it's weird. It's weird to me how good it
They
is.
are ready to, like,
But,
I can see them play on anywhere.
So like them, it was like, well, you know, they kind of came from the punk scene before they evolved to who they are now. So we booked all their shows, and that, you know, we put them on things like Rendezvous, and we have connections to all these other festivals, and we have connections to booking people in town. And so we handle all that for them, and like I said, usually it all starts with, we're going to do a record at some point. And depending on the situation, we'll either pay for a recording or not. It all depends on what the deal is. But like Midnight Passenger, they were already in the thick of it with Jim. So we paid for, you know, the production for that, physical production, which again, I don't think is the important piece to this whole puzzle. But it gives some sort of accountability to each person. And basically the deal is, as like we book the shows, and if they're good shows, well, hopefully they're only good shows, but we do a typical 15% from what they got. We don't tack it onto the venue. We take it from the band. And a lot of times if it's like not, like if it's like a, you know, if they're doing a show, like with a touring band doesn't go that well, we don't say, we'll give us our X amount of dollars. But if it's like we can get them on, you know, like the Summer of the Streets Rock Hall thing for $400, then we'll take our cut from that. So that the revenue for Cellar Door comes from booking fees, and then from after we recoup expenses of the album, we usually do a 50-50 on the record sales.
No, do you feel like if you did charge people up front for your services, because they do seem like really valuable services, that there wouldn't be a venue, or is it just because you're a small? Because like I'm thinking, like, so we have this album, we did get it funded with Kickstarter. A lot of our donors were people that wouldn't go to our shows, like parents and friends of our parents.
People that want to
stuff,
support.
that had the money but would support it. So like in our budgeting, if we could have said, you know, we're going to put $1,000 into someone then booking us a tour, so we wouldn't have to do it, like it would really make sense.
We're trying to figure that out, because we do get offers all the time that are like, hey, can we hire you to do, even just to do marketing, even just, can you do our copywriting, and our copywriting in the sense of like writing press releases, not like copywriting. Can you do our marketing and our social media stuff and help us book shows, and we'll pay you X dollars a month, like a retainer type thing. And I've had situations that we almost went through that, but I think it gets blurry it gets blurry with what cellar door is, I'm afraid, because like there's one thing of like, okay, I'm a human and I need to make money and make a living, so I will do these things. You know, for the bands, like it gets confusing because these bands aren't paying for those services, and then to start taking on clients as a job, that gets weird.
Different,
So
yeah.
we're trying to figure it out. If we kind of dug ourselves a
It's
bit of
like,
a
is
hole.
there anyone else in town that's not shady that would help us?
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, there's totally a lot of people
Yeah.
that would, you know, and that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do with the next step
Yeah, so
with
that's something that we can talk
with this
about later.
rock solid is to like basically, you know, to try to start like little mini companies
Mhm.
that are sort of seeded and find good people and put them in those positions so that they
Yeah.
can help.
We've been talking about splitting it up